Hi, this is the Nature Podcast with Evalottafilms. This is the show where we help climate advocates and conservationists get their mojo back. And today I thought we'd talk about using a particular universal law to our advantage, namely the universal law of attention. That means what we focus on expands. I've been experimenting with this a little bit myself, and I hope you'll join me. I have a bit of a dilemma, you see. A special part of the forest where I grew up is about to get mowed down, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. The quote-unquote mayor of the area believes that you can create a city and still have nature around the corner. I don't think he's going about it the right way, though. That's why I'm bringing this up as an example, because I think the idea, what we focus on, expands really applies to this example. And so let me take you back about a year. And that's when I arrived here back in Sweden and near the forest where I grew up from South Africa, where I'd been living for many, many years and working. And at that part of the pandemic, I got very isolated where I lived. And I thought perhaps the best way out is to just drop out. And so I did. And the saving grace then was really nature, as it always is for me. And I started going into this forest, and it's still there after all these years. But the last few years, they've started to just build and build around where I live, or where I used to live, where I lived when I was little, or where I've come back to now many decades later. And it's been wonderful to be able to go to this forest every week, every day. I mean, I would go out almost every day when we were in isolation here due to COVID as well. And whether it was dark or whether it was snowing, it's where I found solace. And I think a lot of people did. In the past in Sweden, people were not as, I would say, social, so they might not always greet strangers in the forest. But during these times of the corona crisis, people really did, and they really appreciated seeing other people walking around in the forest. And I think many people were walking there, and it started almost wearing down the paths. But I think people really learned the value of nature at that time, because they couldn't go to their offices, and they were working from home, and they couldn't go to the gyms and so on. And also elderly people couldn't really be around anybody else. So people walk the forest. I didn't only walk the forest, I also sat in the forest. And I started thinking about this idea of nature connection. I've always loved nature, but I began to think about, how do we save our environment if we can't, quote unquote, fight against climate change and deforestation and so on? Because that really doesn't work. And why that doesn't work, it's because of the law of attention. And the law of attention says that what we focus on expands and grows. And that's, of course, true if you do it the other way around. If you focus on the fact that here they're going to come and they're going to mow down my forest. It's not my forest, but it's the forest that I love. One of them, and where I found solace. And so I think instead what I have to do is to continue what I've been doing, is to go out into the forest and sit down and really connect with all the green that's there, all the roots, look at it, feel it, hear the birds, and so on. And of course, I've yet to find out exactly how this will turn out in the end. But what I do know is that I feel more powerful when I do that. And I think that nature has a wisdom that's way beyond our years. And if we just sit down and learn to listen, uh, perhaps it will give me some ideas about how to move forward. But in the meantime, I'll know I'm not completely powerless against the big giant in this city where I live. And this is this episode of the Nature Podcast from Evalottafilms, and I hope to update you on what's happening in the forest. And I would love to hear from you if you've got some giants that you're facing, and if you think that we could all connect in this positive way and see if we can't put our attention on the forest and nature and see it grow.